Residents in Ukerewe district, Mwanza region, urged the government to address food price inflation. And in sports, the Tanzania Professional Boxing Regulatory Commission intends to strengthen 100 officials. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Capital News at 9:30. My name is Kaus Banda. First, the national news. Prime Minister Kassim Majaliwa has directed the National Housing Corporation (NHC) to ensure it gets the right investors to enter into joint venture projects that are productive and sustainable for national development. Prime Minister Kassim Majaliwa gave the directive at the launch of the National Housing Joint Venture Policy in Dar es Salaam.
Ni yangu kuwa baada ya uzinduzi wa sera hii, shirika litachambua kwa umakini aina ya wawekezaji watakaoleta maombi yao ya ujenzi wa nyumba. Hapa lengo ni kupata wawekezaji ambao baadaye hawataishia njiani katika kukamilisha miradi yao husika. Serikali ingependa kuona uwekezaji wa shirika na shirika kwa pamoja mnajenga ubia imara utakaosaidia ukuaji wa sekta ya nyumba, ambayo ni moja ya sekta muhimu katika kuchochea ukuaji wa uchumi wetu kwenye nchi.
Kwa sababu unapokuwa na jengo moja ambalo pengine linakuwa na watu wachache, ukiendeleza pale unakuwa umeweka watu zaidi ya 20-30 katika eneo dogo ambalo ulilitumia vibaya wakati unaanza mara ya kwanza kabla ya kuingia kwenye ubia. Kwa hiyo haya yote tunayangalia ili kuona kwamba tuna fast track uchumi wetu kwa kutumia ardhi yetu.
Sera ambayo tunaenda kuizindua leo imeangalia opportunities za uchumi wa leo, imeangalia mafanikio tuliyokuwa tumeyapata katika sera zilizopita, lakini imeangalia makosa ambayo yalikuwepo ili tuweze kuboresha na zile weakness.
Residents from Ukerewe district, Mwanza region have called on the government to address the problem of food shortage in the district by distributing food that will be sold at affordable prices in order to address the problem of price inflation.
Upatikanaji wa chakula kwa sasa ni uko chini sana.
In regard to climatic conditions, it is difficult to get food at this time since there were no enough rains from July to November. Usually in Ukerewe, in these times, harvests are going on for short-term crops like maize and potatoes. But this year, there is nothing to harvest, leading to shortage of food in our district.
Hambo ni moja inanunua kwa shilingi 5,000 na hasa kwenye visiwa inanunua mpaka 5,500, hali ambayo haijawahi kutokea kwenye wilaya hii ya nini ya Ukerewe.
Chakula kimeshafika na tutapokea tani 100 kwa ajili ya
We shall get 100 tons that will be distributed to people who face food shortage on affordable prices of 900 shillings as directed by the government. However, we continue to urge people to continue preparing farms for cultivation and utilize rains that we receive by cultivating crops.
The Vice President of the United Republic of Tanzania, Dr. Philip Mpango, has given 10 directives to the sectoral ministries which aim to address the problem of water shortage in the country, that include removing people living near water sources, reducing cutting of trees for charcoal, planting trees and reducing the price of cooking gas. Vice President Dr. Philip Mpango gave the directives in Mbeya when opening the 8th annual meeting of Water Basin Boards.
Wananchi waliojenga katika vyanzo vya maji vya milima kama ile Uruguru katika mkoa wa Morogoro.
People who have built houses in mountains, water sources, should be given other places to build their houses and must be removed immediately. Not only that, even gas prices should be friendly in order for people to stop using charcoal for cooking. We are ready to cooperate, even if it is planting trees in water sources, so that the next generation will see efforts taken by former leaders. The target is to plant over 2 million trees annually. By October this year, over 1 million trees were planted.
The head of the traffic police force in the country, Ramadan Ghazi, has said that the force has started to implement a special operation on vehicles that are not roadworthy in order to avoid unnecessary accidents.
Lakini vile vile tumeanzisha operation mbalimbali ya kukamata magari mabovu, yawe mabasi, yawe malori.
We have begun different operations on removing motor vehicles that are of below standard, whether buses, lorries, tricycles or motorbikes, being efforts of combating road accidents. We believe if there is collaboration between us, drivers and other road users, road accidents will be history.
Na tumeshirikiana kufanya ukaguzi katika kuzingatia masharti.
We are collaborating in this exercise by adhering to Transportation Act of 2020, especially on online tickets, where we have discovered that some buses are still using the manual format, and take legal measures against them. I call on passengers throughout the country not to accept manual tickets.
The Minister of Works and Transport, Professor Makame Mbarawa, has said that the government is in collaboration with the private sector plans to construct 4-lane 215 kilometers roads from Dar es Salaam, Chalinze to Morogoro, with the government intending to charge fees on motorists using the roads.
Tunaenda kujenga barabara mpya itakayotoka Kibaha inaingia Chalinze mpaka Morogoro. Yule anayetaka kulipa atalipa, atapita. Yule ambaye anataka kwenda mwendo wa kidogo mdogo atapita barabara ya kawaida ambaye hata ikulipa. Hii ndio maendeleo. Sababu kutoka pengine Kibaha mpaka Morogoro kilomita 210, hiyo barabara itakuwa nakwenda kilomita 120 kwa saa.
Njia hii ambayo ni PPP itakuwa na magari makubwa na madogo, lakini pia namna yake ya ulipaji itakuwa tofauti. Tathmini itafanyika, na tathmini hii huyu concessionaire niliyemsema pia atatusaidia kujua gari kubwa litalipaje na gari dogo litalipaje.
Hali ya hewa ni mtambuka kwa sekta mbalimbali. Mojawapo ya sekta ambayo ni muhimu sana ambayo tunaihudumia ni sekta ya usafirishaji. Kwa mfano katika ujenzi wa miundombinu, barabara, viwanja vya ndege.
The President of Zanzibar and Chairman of the Revolutionary Council, Dr. Hussein Ali Mwinyi, has said that apart from continuing to give free health services, his government will start to provide health insurance for all to citizens of Zanzibar. President Dr. Mwinyi said this in a speech read on his behalf by the second Vice President of Zanzibar, Hamed Seleman Abdullah, at the launch of Zanzibar's health package.
The 8th phase government is determined to improve healthcare. What we are launching today has been approved by all leaders. Zanzibar Revolutionary Government will continue to provide health services by giving priority to low-income earners, pregnant women, children under the age of 5, and other special groups. Equipment's prices are increasing in high speed, which are not equivalent to people's incomes. That is why people's incomes are low and expenditures are high in health sector.
Following the threat posed by Ebola outbreak in the neighboring Uganda, the government plans to start construction of centers for preparedness, training for health specialists in order to ready for disease outbreaks. I beg your pardon. This was revealed in Dodoma by the Minister of Health, Umi Mwalimu, when receiving 8 vehicles from the World Health Organization.
Kwa mfano jinsi ya kumhudumia mgonjwa wa Ebola, jinsi ya kumhudumia mgonjwa wa corona, jinsi ya kumhudumia mgonjwa wa kipindupindu.
One ambulance will go to Misenyi, Kagera region in Kaibiele Health Center because there is a special unit for Ebola patients. Uganda is continuing to receive new cases of Ebola patients because of issues of climate change. Animals like rats are running away from bushes and enter our houses looking for food. In the end, they infect us with diseases.
The ambulance will help with the transportation of the patients and the logistics. The Land Cruiser hard top.
Cereal traders in Mtwara Mikindani Municipal have urged the government to use food reserves in order to bring down maize flour prices. The call comes as the volume of the commodity entering Mtwara from various regions declines despite high demand.
Changamoto kubwa tuliyokuwa nayo kwa sisi wafanyabiashara wadogo, mahindi ya shida.
As small-scale traders, we face shortage of maize. Right now, maize sack from Sangea is 115,000 shillings. If there is food reserve, please do consider us. Maize prices are very high.
Upungufu wa chakula. Tumejaribu kufanya round katika soko letu.
We have done investigation in our market. There is shortage of food, especially maize, rice and cassava. We are calling on the government to release some food from food reserves, at least to help in reduction of prices.
Uingiaji wa chakula sio kama mwanzo. Mahindi yanaweza kaingia leo, baada ya siku kadhaa yakaingia tena. Hapo awali ilikuwa flow ni kubwa. Maana kama ni malori yanayoingiza mahindi kila siku anaweza kaingia. Lakini sasa hivi kaanza kaingiza lori moja.
And that marks the end of the national news. We'll take a short break and return for international news. Welcome back, and now international news. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, the security situation has continued to deteriorate due to ongoing clashes between the government military forces FARDC and the M23 rebel group 20 kilometers from Goma. Former President of Kenya has urged both sides to stop the fighting.
I live in Kibumba, and an area which is neighboring to Rwanda. Our neighbors are really torturing us.
Sisi wote tuko na jukumu ya kuhakikisha ya kwamba
we all have the responsibility of ensuring that women, children and the elderly who have become refugees in their own country. I say that despite our conflicts, first let's stop fighting. These people are suffering. Let us have mercy on them. Instead, let's talk.
Heading to Kenya, 3 people died and 4 others are still missing after a 7-story building collapsed in Karasani area, Nairobi in Kenya. 8 other people were rescued from the rubble and are being treated. The governor of Nairobi, Johnson Sakaja, has said that the owner of the building should be arrested and charged with the murder because the required construction permits had not been issued.
So we are here to console with the families that have lost their loved ones, and we are optimistic wale wengine ambao hawajapatikana watapatikana, na wale ambao wako hospitali, I think about 16 are the number. We are going to take stern action for those who will defy.
Woke up trying to earn a living and they lost their lives. This is caused by corruption and impunity. We pass our condolences and our sympathies, and we'll find a way to support those families. But this must be an example, because I know there are many such buildings, many such constructions that are going on in Nairobi that have been happening. This building had an enforcement notice starting from last year and this February. In fact, on the same day yesterday, NCA were here, they closed down the site, but the contractor knows that in such cases you just go on and you pay a few people here and there and you go on. So from the county we're going to take action.
Heading to West Africa, Ivory Coast will be gradually withdrawing its military contingent from the United Nations peacekeeping mission in Mali, MINUSMA, after the continued detention of 46 Ivorian soldiers who have been accused of being mercenaries. The announcement was made in a letter sent to the UN Secretary General. In the letter, Ivory Coast officials said they would not replace their personnel in MINUSMA when the current group rotates in August. Mali's government said it considered the Ivorians to be mercenaries because they were not directly employed by the UN mission and charged them with undermining the state security. And moving on to another story, the G20 summit is underway with the world's largest economies meeting in Bali, Indonesia. The war in Ukraine, its global consequences, and increasing competition between Western countries and China make this G20 a particularly challenging one. For insights into how the gathering is being viewed from Europe, let's turn to William Goodcroft, a journalist with our partner Deutsche Welle in Berlin. William, what are the top issues that the countries like Germany want addressed at the G20?
Well, of course, the number one issue for countries like Germany is Ukraine, Russia's war in Ukraine. Now, Indonesian officials who are hosting the G20 said they didn't want to make the G20 a Ukraine summit. But nonetheless, and of course, Ukraine played a very large role and took up a lot of space in the G20 conversation, especially given the recent apparent rocket launch into Poland that allegedly killed 2 Polish people. It's still being clarified what exactly happened there. President Joe Biden saying it might not have actually been a Russian rocket, but nonetheless a cause for grave concern that actually interrupted some of the G20 discussions for an emergency NATO meeting regarding that incident of that rocket launch, or the rocket landing on the Polish side of the border just across from Ukraine. So Germany and its Western partners did get what it wanted. It seems that the communique that is going to be coming out of the G20 will be harshly criticizing Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Remember, Russia is part of the G20. And another thing that Germany got is a declaration of against nuclear weapons, to make very clear that nuclear weapons in general, and specifically in regards to the war in Ukraine, are absolutely unacceptable. Now, it's probably unlikely to get full agreement of all the partners in the G20. Again, Russia is part of the G20. However, Western officials have expressed actual surprise that many of the other countries in the G20 are willing to go along so strongly with a condemnation of the war in Ukraine, and of course a prohibition or speaking out against any use of nuclear weapons.
Now, William, Germany appears to be at crossroads in its foreign policy, especially with regards to Asia. Can you tell us more about how it's trying to position itself?
That's right. Germany, for a long time, has viewed itself purely as an economic power, looking to do business, looking to do trade with countries all around the world to do what's best for the German economy. Remember, the German economy is very dependent on its exports, so it needs to do strong, brisk business with all kinds of countries, especially big powers like China, to do what's right for its own economy. But more and more, Germany is under pressure from its European allies, from the United States, from NATO, to view the world in a much more holistic, a much more comprehensive perspective. That it's not just a way to make money, it's not just an economic question or a business question. There's also geopolitical, geostrategic, defense issues that Germany needs to step up to its place in the world, not only as an economic power, but as a power in all sorts of ways. And that is the pivot that Germany is trying to make, especially when it comes to China. Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, saying that he wants to view the Asia-Pacific region as more than China, not necessarily decoupling from China. China is Germany's largest goods trading partner in the world. But diversifying and looking to other countries around Asia and really all around the world, including parts of Africa, where it can do not only business but see itself as a bigger player in the world.
And lastly, for the parts of the world not directly involved in the G20, why does the summit really matter?
Well, the G20 is, of course, the largest leading economies in the world. It represents a huge amount of total global trade, total global GDP, and I think about something around 60% of the global population. So that's a lot of the world, but it's certainly not the entire world. And yet, if we just use the example of the war in Ukraine, for example, there are many countries not at all involved in the war in Ukraine, certainly not in the way that Western countries are. Nonetheless, the war in Ukraine is gravely affecting everyone in the world when it comes to food prices, when it comes to energy prices, when it comes to inflation. So just to use the war in Ukraine as an example, what happens in other countries affects places even if they're not directly involved. And with the G20 having so much sway over global matters, over global trade, if the G20 speaks in one voice or almost in one voice, it can have serious impacts on also countries not directly involved, but involved as partners.
Thank you, William, for sharing that insight. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of the international news. We'll take a short break and return for business news. Glad to have you back, and now business stories. Mobile phone operator Vodacom Tanzania PLC has launched 5G routers to be used in homes as well as commercial purposes by customers who want fast and efficient internet services.
With 5G internet, businesses, individual customers are promised very high speeds, greater capacity, very low latency that will support innovations such as Internet of Things, network slicing, and creating smart and a more connected Tanzania with the rest of the world. 5G home and business internet, powered by the only 5G network in the country, is ideal for anybody who wants ultra-fast connectivity to stream, game, or work flexibly from home or office.
Confederation of Tanzania Industries CTI has called on big and small companies to ensure they produce products that meet quality standard requirements so as to be competitive in the international market.
Zawadi hizi zitakazotolewa kwa wazalishaji bora.
Prizes will be given to best producers. The competition began since 2005 with the aim of sensitizing production of good quality products in the country, as well as giving prizes to companies that have showed creativity.
Hizi ni tuzo za 16 na sisi tukiwa benki ya Kizalendo.
These are 16th awards. As a patriotic bank, it is a privilege of being part of industrial growth in the country. We thank the government under President Samia Suluhu Hassan for her continued efforts in putting good investment and trade environment.
Tanzania Bureau of Standards TBS has started to provide training to owners of garages and spare parts dealers in Arusha region with the aim of improving services and addressing the problem of influx of substandard spare parts in the market.
Gereji ni nyingi sana, ni bubu. Hizi gereji bubu ni kwamba hazina ubora na pia zinaharibu mazingira. Ndio maana tumegundua iko kitu, kwa tunaenda taratibu, na ndio maana tunawapa semina hawa wenye garages na pia na hawa wanaoagiza vipuli ama spare parts za magari.
I have learned many things, including importance of Tanzania Bureau of Standards TBS and procedures to follow for certification of products and services.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of the business news. We'll take a short break and return for sports. This is Capital News, and now sports. Young Africans face their former coach Hans van Perlem when they go against Singida Big Stars tomorrow in the NBC Premier League game without their #1 goalie Jigui Diarra and Gael Bigirimana. And moving on to another story, the Tanzania Professional Boxing Regulatory Commission intends to strengthen the ability of more than 100 officials, judges, timers, doctors, coaches and promoters of the sport in order to develop the sport.
Kwanza moja ni kufanya induction ya wa maofisa wa ulingoni wapya. Tumepata maombi mengi kutoka kwa watu mbalimbali wakiomba.
First, we want to perform an induction of new ring officials. We have requests from different people seeking to have the opportunity to be officials. So this 5-day seminar will just be the beginning.
The National Sports Council has announced the Baseball and Softball Association election will take place on December 12th in Dar es Salaam.
Uchaguzi huo utafanyika tarehe 16 kabla ya kuelekea kwenye hiyo siku ya tarehe 18 kwenye uchaguzi. Fomu hizo zitatolewa kuanzia leo hii tarehe 16 hadi tarehe 12 mwezi wa 12. Ndio mwisho.
The elections will take place in the 16th before going to the 18th elections. The forms will be available from today, the 16th, to the 12th of December. That is the end of returning the forms. Posts contested include that of a chairperson, a vice chair, the general secretary, assistant secretary, as well as the accountant.
And that sports item ends our news bulletin for tonight. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.